attention to what you're seeing right now. This footage was recovered from the phone of 29-year-old Amanda Chen, found 3 days after she went missing in the Riverside State forest. Look closely at the trail ahead. Those aren't Halloween decorations. Notice the mechanical spider in the center of the path, how the synthetic webbing creates almost a tunnel through the trees. Amanda thought she'd stumbled onto someone's abandoned seasonal display. She had no idea she was walking into a carefully constructed death trap. This was the last thing Amanda Chen ever filmed. And what happened in the moments after she pressed stop would lead investigators into one of the most disturbing criminal minds they'd ever encountered. You know that moment when you're hiking alone and you feel completely at peace? That's exactly where Amanda Chen was on the morning of October 15th, 2019. She'd driven 2 hours from Portland, Oregon to explore the trails at Riverside State Forest, a place she'd been meaning to visit for months. Amanda was a freelance graphic designer who'd recently gone through a difficult breakup, and these solo hiking trips had become her therapy. Her best friend, Jessica Torres, told police that Amanda had been in good spirits that morning, sending her photos of the sunrise and joking about finally getting some me time. Amanda was methodical about her hikes. She always told someone where she was going, she carried a fully charged phone, and she never strayed from marked trails. That morning, she'd chosen the Pinewood Loop, a moderate 5-mile trail that was supposed to take her through some of the forest's most scenic areas. The trail was popular enough that she'd expected to see other hikers, but remote enough to give her that sense of solitude she craved. What Amanda didn't know was that someone had been watching the trail for weeks, someone who'd been planning something that went far beyond anything investigators had seen before. And when she set off down that path at 8:30 that morning, she was walking straight into a nightmare that had been carefully constructed just for someone like her. Let me paint you a picture of what should have happened that day. Amanda was supposed to complete the loop by early afternoon and meet Jessica for a late lunch at their favorite Thai restaurant in Portland. Jessica texted her around noon. No response. She tried calling at 1 o'clock. The call went straight to voicemail. By 3 o'clock, Jessica was worried. By 6 o'clock, when Amanda still hadn't shown up and hadn't been active on any social media, Jessica called the police. The Riverside County Sheriff's Department sent deputies to the trailhead parking area around 7:30 that evening. Amanda's silver Honda Civic was still there, parked exactly where she'd left it that morning. Her wallet was locked inside. Her gym bag was in the trunk. Everything looked normal, except Amanda hadn't come back. Deputy Mark O'Sullivan was the first officer on scene, and he told me later that he initially thought this might be a case of someone getting lost or injured on the trail. It happens more often than you'd think, even on well-marked paths, but there was something about the situation that bothered him. Amanda's car was neat, organized, her hiking boots were gone, but her regular shoes were placed carefully in the back seat. This was someone who planned things out. Search and rescue teams were deployed at first light the next morning. 12 volunteers, 3 deputies, and 2 K-9 units began working their way along the Pinewood Loop. The dogs picked up Amanda's scent immediately. She definitely started on this trail. They followed it for about 2 miles before something strange happened. The dogs became agitated, circling an area where the trail curved through a dense section of Douglas firs. That's when volunteer searcher Robert Hayes saw it. At first, he thought it was leftover Halloween decorations, someone's elaborate prank, or maybe an abandoned haunted trail setup. Synthetic spider webs stretched between the trees, creating an almost tunnel-like effect. And there, suspended in the center of the path, was this massive mechanical spider prop, the kind you'd see at a professional haunted house. But here's what made it even more horrific. As Robert got closer, he realized the webbing was anchored with climbing rope and tent stakes. This wasn't decorative. This was structural. And when he looked down at the ground beneath where the mechanical spider hung, he saw drag marks in the dirt. Fresh ones. Robert immediately radioed for the deputies. Within minutes, Deputy Sullivan and his partner were examining the scene. That's when they found Amanda's phone, partially hidden beneath some fallen leaves about 15 feet from the web structure. The screen was cracked, like it had been dropped or thrown. And when they powered it on, the last thing in her camera roll was that video. Amanda filming the spiderweb display, her voice audible on the recording, What the hell is this? This is insane. Someone really went all out. The timestamp on the video was 9:17 the previous morning. Amanda had been missing for nearly 24 hours. Detective Lisa Park was called to the scene around 10 o'clock. She was a 15-year veteran of the sheriff's department, and she'd worked everything from domestic cases to homicides. But when she arrived at that section of trail and saw the elaborate setup, she felt her stomach drop. This wasn't random. This was planned, constructed, intentional. "We need to process this entire area as a crime scene," she told her team. "And we need to find Amanda Chen, now." The search intensified. They expanded the perimeter, bringing in additional personnel and equipment. The K-9 units picked up the scent trail again, but here's the thing about those woods. They're dense. 30,000 acres of forest with dozens of unmarked paths and old logging roads. If someone wanted to hide something out there, they had plenty of options. It was volunteer searcher Patricia Mendez who made the discovery everyone had been dreading. About a quarter-mile off the main trail, down an embankment that wouldn't be visible unless you knew exactly where to look, she found a disturbed area of ground. Fresh dirt, branches arranged in a way that didn't look natural. She called for the team, and when they carefully cleared away the camouflage of leaves and branches, they found Amanda. She was buried in a shallow grave, wrapped in industrial plastic sheeting. The medical examiner would later determine she'd died from blunt force trauma to the head, likely within an hour of filming that video. But what disturbed investigators even more was how carefully she'd been positioned. Her arms were crossed over her chest. Her hiking boots had been removed and placed beside her. This wasn't just murder. This was ritual. The news broke that evening. Local woman found dead in Riverside State Forest. Amanda's family was devastated. Her mother, Susan Chen, told reporters that Amanda was her only daughter, a vibrant young woman who loved nature and photography and had her whole life ahead of her. How could this happen on a public trail in broad daylight? But here's what haunted everyone involved in that initial investigation. The spider web display, the careful burial, the way Amanda's phone had been left at the scene, almost like someone wanted it to be found. Detective Park couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't just dealing with an opportunistic crime. This was something else entirely. Detective Park assembled a task force the day after Amanda's body was discovered. She pulled in forensic specialists, criminal psychologists, and tech experts. Because here's the thing, that spiderweb installation wasn't thrown together quickly. Someone had spent time building it, planning it, and that meant evidence. The forensics team spent 3 days processing that section of trail. They documented everything, photographed every angle of the web display, collected samples of the synthetic webbing, the climbing rope, the tent stakes. They dismantled the mechanical spider carefully, bagging each component, and what they found inside that prop changed everything. The spider wasn't just a decoration, it had been modified. Someone had installed a small wireless camera inside the spider's body, positioned so it would capture anyone who walked down that trail. And here's what made Detective Park's blood run cold. When the tech team examined the camera, they found it had been recording. And it was connected to a wireless transmitter. Someone was watching, the tech analyst told her. This was being live-streamed somewhere. The team worked frantically to trace the signal. The camera had been connected to a portable router hidden in the woods, which was then linked to a cellular hotspot. It took them 2 days to track down the account associated with that hotspot, and when they did, they hit their first major break. The account was registered to a prepaid phone purchased at an electronics store in Salem, Oregon. Detective Park and her partner, Detective Raymond Cross, drove to Salem and spent hours reviewing security footage from that electronics store. And there he was, a man in his early 40s wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, purchasing the prepaid phone and hotspot device with cash. The footage wasn't great, but it was something. Meanwhile, the forensics team was analyzing the physical evidence from the scene. The synthetic webbing was a specific type, theatrical grade, the kind used in professional haunted attractions. The climbing rope was a brand sold primarily through outdoor supply stores. And the mechanical spider itself? That was custom built, not something you could buy off the shelf. Detective Cross started calling around to haunted attractions in Oregon and Washington. Had anyone reported equipment stolen? Did anyone recognize the mechanical spider from the photos? Most calls led nowhere, but then he connected with Marcus Brennan, the owner of Nightmare Manor, a popular haunted house in Eugene. "Yeah, I fired someone who used to build stuff like that," Marcus told him. "Guy named Derek Hartman. Brilliant special effects designer, but he got way too intense about things. Started making displays that were honestly disturbing, not fun scary, but actually psychologically messed up. I had to let him go last year." Derek Hartman, 43 years old, former special effects designer with a background in theatrical production. He'd worked at various haunted attractions across the Pacific Northwest before being terminated from Nightmare Manor in March of 2018. The reason for termination? Creating unauthorized displays that depicted realistic violence and made customers genuinely uncomfortable rather than entertained. Detective Park ran his name through the system. Derek had no criminal record, not even a traffic ticket, but when they started digging deeper, looking at his social media presence and online activity, a picture began to emerge. Derek was active on several forums dedicated to special effects and horror movie production, but some of his posts were concerning. He talked about authentic fear responses and immersive terror experiences. He'd gotten into arguments with other forum members about the line between entertainment and exploitation. They obtained a warrant for Derek's financial records, and here's what they found. In the weeks leading up to Amanda's murder, he'd made purchases that aligned perfectly with the evidence. Synthetic webbing from a theatrical supply company, climbing rope from an outdoor store, electronic components from various retailers. He'd been building something, but here's where it gets even more twisted. Detective Park's team discovered that Derek had been frequenting Riverside State Forest for months. His credit card showed gas purchases at stations near the trailhead. A local coffee shop owner remembered seeing him multiple times, always alone, always dressed for hiking. He'd been scouting, learning the patterns, figuring out when the trails were most isolated. The team located Derek's last known address, a rental house on the outskirts of Eugene. When they arrived with a search warrant on October 23rd, they found the house had been cleared out. Derek was gone, but he hadn't been careful enough. In the garage, they found his workshop, and what they discovered there made Detective Park realize they were dealing with something far more sinister than a single murder. The workshop was filled with materials, more synthetic webbing, more mechanical parts, detailed sketches and plans for multiple installations, as Derek called them in his notebooks. He'd been planning other locations, other trails, other setups. Amanda wasn't his first victim. She was his first successful hunt. They found his journals, page after page of writings about creating authentic fear experiences, about how people had become desensitized to horror through movies and haunted houses, about how he wanted to bring real terror back to entertainment. The journals talked about a woman named Emily who'd rejected his vision. Investigators would later identify this as Emily Rodriguez, his former girlfriend who'd broken up with him in early 2017 after he'd become increasingly obsessed with violent imagery. But the most chilling discovery was a wall in his workshop covered with printed photographs, images of hiking trails, of people on those trails, clearly photographed without their knowledge. And there, among dozens of others, was a photo of Amanda Chen. She'd been at Riverside State Forest 3 weeks before her murder, and Derek had photographed her without her knowledge. He'd been watching her, selecting her. The evidence showed that Derek had specifically chosen victims who fit a certain profile, young women hiking alone on less traveled trails. He'd been studying their patterns, their habits. Amanda had posted on a hiking forum about planning to visit Riverside State Forest. Derek had been active on the same forum under a pseudonym. He knew she was coming. Detective Park issued a warrant for Derek's arrest on multiple charges, and his photo was sent to law enforcement agencies across the country. But Derek had vanished. His car was found abandoned at a bus station in Portland, wiped clean of fingerprints. He'd planned his escape as carefully as he'd planned his crime. The manhunt expanded. Federal authorities got involved. Derek's photo was shown on news broadcasts and shared across social media. Amanda's family begged for anyone with information to come forward. Her mother appeared on local news, her voice shaking, "Please, if you know where this man is, if you've seen him, call the police. Don't let him do this to another family." For 3 weeks, there were no credible sightings of Derek Hartman. He'd disappeared completely, and investigators worried he might have fled the country, or worse, that he was already planning his next attack. Detective Park couldn't sleep. Every night she reviewed the evidence, looking for something they might have missed. Then, on November 14th, they caught a break. A hiker named Thomas Wu was exploring the Columbia River Gorge in Washington when he noticed something that didn't look right. Synthetic webbing stretched between trees near a less-traveled trail. It looked similar to the Halloween decorations he'd seen in the news coverage of Amanda Chen's case. Thomas didn't approach. He called the police immediately. Within hours, Detective Park and a team of officers were on site, and what they found confirmed their worst fears. Derek had been setting up another installation. The webbing was in place. A mechanical spider prop was positioned nearby, though not yet activated. He'd been building another trap, but Derek himself wasn't there. The site looked like it had been abandoned mid-construction. There was camping equipment nearby, a tent, a sleeping bag, food supplies. It looked like he'd been living in the woods, hiding out while he prepared his next crime. The police established surveillance on the site. If Derek came back, they'd be ready. For 2 days, nothing happened. Then, on the morning of November 16th, a motion-activated camera they'd placed near the campsite captured movement. Derek Hartman walked into the clearing at 6:43 a.m. He was carrying additional supplies, more webbing, tools, electronic equipment. He looked thinner than in his photos, his beard unkempt, his clothes dirty. He'd been living rough, but he was still focused on his mission. The tactical team moved in. Derek never had a chance to run. He was arrested without incident, though Detective Park told me later that the look on his face when they surrounded him was one of genuine surprise, like he'd thought he was untouchable, like he believed he'd never be caught. They transported Derek to the Riverside County Sheriff's Department for interrogation. For the first 12 hours, he said nothing. He invoked his right to an attorney and sat in the interview room in complete silence. But here's the thing about guys like Derek. They want to talk about their work. They want recognition for what they've created. His attorney arrived, and after consultation, Derek agreed to answer questions. But only, he said, if Detective Park would understand the artistic merit of what he'd done. She agreed to listen, though it took everything in her not to react to what he was about to say. Derek described his project in detail. He talked about how he'd become disillusioned with traditional horror entertainment, how nothing was real anymore, how he wanted to create genuine fear, genuine terror, the kind that people would never forget. He talked about selecting victims who embodied innocence and trust, who would walk into his installations thinking they were seeing something fun or interesting. Amanda was perfect, he said, his voice disturbingly calm. She filmed it. She engaged with the display. She had that moment of curiosity before the fear. That's what I wanted to capture. Detective Park asked about the camera. Why stream it? Why record it? Derek smiled. Art should be shared. There's a community out there that appreciates real experiences, not fake blood and rubber masks, real fear, real consequences. It was this statement that led investigators to the darkest part of Derek's crimes. The tech team had been working around the clock to trace the wireless signal from the camera in Amanda's case. They'd finally succeeded in identifying where the footage was being transmitted, to a private server Derek had set up, which was then streaming to an encrypted dark web forum. When they gained access to that server, they found recordings, not just from Amanda's murder, but from other test runs Derek had conducted. Times when he'd set up displays and filmed hikers' reactions when they encountered them. None of these had resulted in violence. Derek had been practicing, refining his approach, building up to what he called his first complete piece. But here's what made Detective Park's investigation even more critical. Among the files on that server, they found subscriber information, people who'd been paying to access Derek's streams, 37 different accounts, scattered across multiple countries. These weren't just passive observers, they'd been actively encouraging Derek, sending him messages through encrypted channels, requesting specific scenarios. The FBI took over that portion of the investigation, working with international law enforcement to identify and locate these subscribers. Several were arrested on charges related to conspiracy and solicitation of murder. The case expanded far beyond just Derek Hartman. But the forensics team also made another crucial discovery. Remember that footage Amanda had taken on her phone? The tech analysts had examined it more closely, enhancing the audio and video. And in the background of Amanda's video, partially obscured by the trees, you could see a figure, someone standing about 50 yards away, watching her film the display. It was Derek. He'd been there the entire time, watching Amanda's reaction, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That video that Amanda had filmed, her last moments of innocence, thinking she'd just found something interesting to photograph, had captured her killer in the frame. When Detective Park showed Derek this enhanced footage during interrogation, something changed in his expression. The arrogance faded. He seemed to realize, maybe for the first time, that his art had captured evidence of his own guilt. He'd been so focused on filming Amanda's fear that he'd never considered he might have been caught on her camera. Derek Hartman's trial began in June of 2020. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence: the forensics from the crime scene, the materials found in his workshop, his own journals describing his plans, and Amanda's phone footage showing Derek lurking in the background. His defense team tried to argue diminished capacity, suggesting Derek had been suffering from mental illness that impaired his judgment. But the careful planning, the detailed preparations, and the calculated nature of his crimes made that argument fall flat. The jury deliberated for just 6 hours before returning with their verdict: guilty on all counts. When the judge asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, Derek stood and addressed the courtroom. He didn't apologize. He didn't show remorse. Instead, he talked about society's failure to appreciate authentic artistic vision. Amanda's mother walked out of the courtroom in tears. Derek Hartman was convicted of first-degree murder with special circumstances, kidnapping, and multiple counts of stalking. He received a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. He's currently incarcerated at Oregon State Penitentiary, where he'll spend the rest of his life. But the impact of this case extends far beyond Derek's conviction. Amanda's family established the Amanda Chen Hiking Safety Foundation, which works to improve safety measures on remote trails and provides GPS trackers to solo hikers. Trail systems across Oregon and Washington have increased their ranger patrols and installed more emergency call boxes. The dark web forum that had hosted Derek's streams was shut down completely, and several of the subscribers who'd encouraged his actions received prison sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years. The FBI continues to monitor similar forums, working to prevent future incidents. Amanda's mother, Susan, told me recently that she still can't hike the trails her daughter loved, but she's channeled her grief into advocacy work, speaking at conferences about trail safety and the dangers of online communities that glorify violence. Amanda loved the outdoors, Susan said. She found peace there. I want to make sure other families don't lose their daughters to someone's twisted idea of art. Amanda Chen was 29 years old when she died. She was a talented graphic designer, a devoted friend, a daughter who called her mother every Sunday. She loved photography, Thai food, and the quiet moments on hiking trails when the world felt peaceful. She should have come home that day. She should have had decades more of those peaceful moments. Instead, she became the victim of a man who confused cruelty with creativity, who turned the beauty of nature into a hunting ground. But while Derek Hartman took Amanda's life, he didn't take her legacy. Her name lives on through the foundation that protects other hikers, through the increased safety measures that now exist on trails across the Pacific Northwest, through the memory of a young woman who found joy in the simple act of walking through the woods on an October morning. Rest in peace, Amanda Chen. Your light continues to shine through the work being done in your name.